Well, so I wanted to come here and try and paint a bigger picture of what could be going on geopolitically between Europe, between America, between Trump, tariffs, economy, all that sort of stuff, right? Because fundamentally, we don't know anything really, right? We know little tidbits here. We know the surface area of whatever dramatic unfolding is going on. So anybody claiming to have the total picture and to know exactly what's going on and what will come of it, you can't possibly, right? You can't. I don't know. Whoever you are, I'm sure you don't know. And it's important we can say that, right? To understand what you don't know. And when you're speaking, to understand when you're speculating. And to understand when you're telling something that you do know, you know, right? So I'm just going to add a few little pieces around the board, really, and see if it makes sense to yourself, right? So currently we have tariffs have been implemented. Some countries are looking to make deals. The EU is looking to make a deal. I think Japan is looking to negotiate. So there's a lot of world leaders that are either in Washington now or they're heading there, right, to negotiate with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump also said that tariffs are great in terms of getting to negotiations, right? They're a great tool or a weapon, even if you want, to force negotiation, right, between different nations, in this case America and whichever other nations, right? So you kind of have to pick apart what he's saying and evaluate both of it, right? So it might be that tariffs are his main objective and he wants to bring back as much wealth to America as possible so we can just have a great booming economic America, right? That might be his end goal. Or there might be more to it, right? He might get that as a result of tackling something bigger, right? And he might get that and use that to tackle something bigger. I don't know, but it's possible, right? Because there's very few things that have been taken off the table, right? It's kind of you're handheld along the way to a certain point, and then you kind of have to speculate based on, you have to account for all of the goings-ons, right? So any theory on what's going on has to nearly account for all of the moving parts involved in it, right? And I'm trying to do that here. So yeah, so if he's using the tariffs as a way of getting negotiations, because the tariffs are good for America anyway, right? But he added they're good for negotiations. So what is it he wants to negotiate about? Is it just the business side of it, or is there more to it? So is he looking to just balance business transactions, economic transactions between America and states that have been sucking more wealth out of America than they've been given in proportionally, right? And are there other things that could be going on that we're not privy to? Of course, naturally, right? Of course. Why would we assume we're given everything, all of the information? We're privy to the same information that the leaders of these states are privy to. Of course we're not, right? So let's pull back a second and we'll go back to Trump's first term. He put heavy sanctions and he tore up the agreement between America and Iran, right? America ended up, prior to him, nearly funding Iran with hundreds of billions of dollars, right? Delivered on pallets and cash, right? He got rid of that sort of stuff, right? And he says it himself, Iran was broke under him and it couldn't fund these terror organizations that they've been known to fund, right? Or maybe they're not and they're a big scapegoat for someone else doing it, right? But either way, this is the way it's been sold to us, that Iran had been funding these organizations. Trump stopped that, and he has been softly asserting himself, and even a little bit more powerfully than softly, right? Asserting himself over Iran. And why? He obviously wants some sort of change there, right? So what kind of change does he want? Does he want to get rid of the leadership over there, right? A regime change, or does he just want a cultural change? Does he want an economic change? Does he want a geopolitical change, right? Does he want the influence that their hands are currently involved in? Does he want that diminished, right? Or at least kept local to Iran? Is that what he's after? Who knows, right? So we know that Iran have been funding Islamic terrorist groups which are naturally opposed to the Western civilization, right? At least on paper. from Hezbollah to Hamas to probably loads of other different terrorist organizations, right, that we're not being made aware of, right? So the problem then, how does that relate to Europe, right? And what does that have to do with Trump meeting European leaders? Well, Europe is obviously on the receiving end of, what do you even call it, right? You can call it migration, a jihad migration, right? Migration is always used as a tool of jihad, right, to spread and build a caliphate, worldwide Islam, right? We understand this. This is not strange. This is not speculative. This is not even controversial, right? We know this. So we've been accepting in probably millions and millions and millions of people at this stage. I wouldn't even say we know the number. If there was a gun to European leaders' heads, I wouldn't say they know the number, right? And this really, really picked up with the Syrian migrant crisis, and I forget what year it was. It might have been 2012, 2011, in the round there, but it really picked up then, right? And what have we seen since then? So have we found, what would you call them, sleepers, agents, soldiers, jihadists, mercenaries who are affiliated with any of these terrorist organizations? Have we found them in Europe? So again, look, now we have America, we have Iran, and then we have Europe, right? That now we're beginning to see if they're interlinked, right? In Europe, we had the 2015 Paris attacks, which killed 130 people, were carried out by a network of ISIS operatives, right? And again, we remember that Trump and Putin went in and, so we're told, took out ISIS. So with the Paris attacks, which were carried out by ISIS operatives, right? So people that had come into France and Europe, right, who are affiliated with Middle Eastern terrorist organizations, right? And now people might throw their hands up and say, but is America funding them? It's America funding them. Yeah. You could quibble on that, right? It might not be America funding them, but their funding is certainly coming from America. It depends what you mean when you say America, right? Because there's obviously good people there too, and then there's the rogue element, right? The USAID, this money is just being funneled in the billions to these just strange initiatives, right? Which are obviously landing back in peculiar situations and scenarios, right? So we Tucker Carlson saying that a lot of the weapons and arms that was being sent to the Ukraine from America was ending up back in the hands of these drug cartels in Mexico, right? So big mess, big dirty, filthy mess, right? We also had Obama with Fast and the Furious, where he was running guns into Mexico, right? So strange stuff. What's going on there, right? It almost looks like it's been set up so America is besieged and Europe is besieged, right? Or America is even besieged based on what's going on in Europe, right? This sort of thing. So these are the dynamics that are at play, right? There's loads of moving parts in this. In 2016, we had the Brussels bombings, which killed 32 people, again linked to ISIS operatives, right? And we had, remember this fella, Jesus, yeah, this is going back, Anjem Chowdhury. Do you remember him in England? He was probably one of the first kind of poster boys for, we're just trying to be Muslims and people should accept us. But in 2016, he was convicted for recruiting and encouraging support for ISIS, right? While not a soldier himself, he influenced numerous individuals to join ISIS, some of whom operated covertly in the UK and Europe before travelling to Syria to carrying out local plots. In 2007, so this is in America now. In 2007, authorities disrupted a plot by the Islamic Jihad Union, arresting 3 individuals planning attacks on US targets. More recently, Germany has seen arrests of suspected ISIS sympathizers, including returnees from Syria, who are monitored for potential sleeper activities, right? So this is an active thing that's going on, right? There's serious intelligence stuff going on here. Sleeper agents, double agents, all that stuff is all going on, right? And on the surface, we're just thinking politics and economics, right? But there's undercurrents of immense danger and jeopardy underpinning all that sort of stuff, right? Into Ireland now, right? So we have the European connection with the Middle East, the flow of sleeper cells from the Middle East into Europe and into America as well, right? We'll get to that in a second. But does Ireland tie into that? It does, right? So if you remember St. Patrick's Day just gone, we were given a warning from Interpol, right? The International Police, who suggested that the potential for a terrorist attack in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, probably on a parade, right, if there was going to be one, was significant enough for them to release that as a warning, right? Which would tell you that they're already aware. The Interpol and the Irish Gardaí intelligence, they're obviously either aware or they're very, very suspicious and what would the word be, right? They are aware of, I suppose, the potential for these sleeper cells being in Ireland if they're not already explicitly knowledgeable about them. They just haven't been able to pin anything on them, right? So that's alive in Ireland then as well. Across Europe, we see stabbings, murders, and just crashing into gatherings of people. And we've seen this for years and years and years now at this stage, right? Germany and France, probably dependent on the size of the countries, right? But France has had decades and decades of demographic shift, right, from former colonies, Algeria and stuff. So they've been incredibly susceptible to it, as has England, right? As is blatantly obvious now. Again, not controversial, just statements of facts. These are facts. We have seen this in Ireland, right? That Yusuf Palani, he came to Ireland in 2006 with his parents, right, I believe, and in 2022, he was found with 357,000 euros in cash on his person, right, or in his house, in 200 and 500 euro notes, right? So how did they find that? Well, he was after beheading two homosexual men for, I suppose, being homosexual, right? Being anti-Islamic, I suppose, or it being sinful in Islamic. You can read that motivation into it if you want, right? People would claim that it wasn't a terrorist attack, but the wad of money that he was found in is highly suspicious, right? That's a serious problem, serious problem. Then we have the story of Lisa Smith, right? And Smith, this is from Grok, right? So Smith initially served in the Irish Army, joining the 27th Infantry Battalion at the age of 19 before transferring to the Irish Air Corps in 2011. During her military career, she worked on the government jet, accompanying notable figures like former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern. Described by colleagues as industrious and reliable, her life took a dramatic turn after she converted to Islam in 2011. Those little total divergent things when you come to people that are involved in military or music industries even, right, and any of those sort of culture creators, right, they should perk your interest up, right? Where are we? Yeah, her life took a dramatic turn after she converted to Islam in 2011. Following her conversion, she left the military, reportedly influenced by a strict Salafi interpretation of Islam she encountered at a mosque in Dundalk, right? Her marriage broke down after this time, and in 2015 she travelled to Syria to join ISIS, motivated by a desire to live under Sharia law in what she believed would be a pure Islamic state. Right, so that's a serious, serious shift in perspective, right? So what happened there to her? Right, and I'm not saying that because something happened to her, it absolves her of any treachery or any questionable carry on, right? But there's something there, right? So she goes from signing up to a job to protect Ireland to wanting to move to Syria to live under Sharia law. That's bizarre, right? It's bizarre. I think she's recently she returned with a child anyway, and she recently got sentenced, I think, to 15 months or so. But these things are happening in Ireland, right? So you have potential terrorist attacks, potential sleeper cells. You remember the guy that blew himself up in a nail bomb in a homeless hostel as well. So what's the story there? We had the Algerian guy, allegedly Algerian again, who knows, right? But it's been leaked out that he was the guy who nearly killed those kids in Dublin, right? And again, make it out what you will, but these things are happening, right? These things are absolutely happening in Ireland. So we have it from America, we have it in Europe, right? Funneling up from Middle East into Europe, and we have it in America as well. Yeah, so we're on to America now. While not all is labelled as formal sleeper cells, individuals radicalised by ISIS have been uncovered in the US. For example, in 2015, Elton Simpson and Nadir Sufi, inspired by ISIS, attacked a Draw Muhammad event in Garland, Texas, killing a security guard before being killed by police. Texas, could you pick the worst place to go and do something like that? I guarantee you nearly everyone in that art gallery had a revolver on their hip, a big iron on their hip, right? So that was a silly move. But these cells are there, right? Simpson had been under FBI surveillance for years, suggesting a period of dormancy before activation, right? Sleeper cells. You go in and you act as if you're just a regular person there for refuge and there for a better way of life. And then when the call comes, you're activated, right? Whether you're even aware you're being activated or not, right? We remember the Manchurian Candidate, MK Ultra, all that sort of stuff. Whether you're aware, the Sirhan, whether you're aware that you're being activated or not is irrelevant, right? You're a sleeper cell. You're asleep until you're activated and awake, and then you carry out what you're there to do, right? This stuff is going on. It's not just movies, right? Movies kind of are there to desensitize you to an idea that might be coming to the fore in the next few years. So by the time it comes, it's not as shocking because you're after seeing it in a movie first, right? But because you've seen it in a movie first, you take it as fantasy and fiction, right? So you don't treat it with the perspective that and the seriousness that it happening in reality would warrant, right? So you're softened to it. You see this with almost any new changes, right? So what's going on in the media is what's going to be pushed and normalized over the coming years, right? The media is weird like that, but it's interesting. It's like a divinatory tool, right? The December 2019 Naval Air Station Pensacola shooting by Mohammed al-Shamrani, a Saudi military trainee, was linked to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Al-Shamrani had coordinated with the Arabian Peninsula Squadron, or Al-Qaeda, whatever, prior to the attack, which killed 3 US sailors, indicating he operated covertly while embedded in a legitimate training program, right? So, again, come over here, operate under probably some official status, but that's not your main intention there, right? So, with all of this going on, with Trump posturing to Iran as bold as they seem to appear to sell themselves, at least in the funding of terrorist organizations, right? They're well able, and they're more than interested in fighting these proxy wars, right? So whether they'll officially stick their name on a declaration of war or a declaration of antagonism to America, we don't know, right? But they might. So if you were Donald Trump, what would you be trying to do, right? Obviously, to eradicate any potential risk you have in America, and you can see that with the ICE Border Patrol, who are going around rounding up what they're saying are the most violent criminals. But I would imagine what's top of that priority is anybody that's linked back to any of these terrorist organizations. They're probably just not refusing, but they are postponing coming out and saying that to the public, because that would rattle the lives out of people if they came out and said what we're really chasing here are potential sleepers that could be here to set off whatever in this country, right? To overthrow this country from within and take it over. Okay? You always hear it, right? So for the sake of not to cause public outrage or public panic, we withheld some of this information for national security reasons. That sort of thing, right? And there's always arguments to be made whether that's justified or not. So if you were Trump, you would be trying to get rid of that. And then what you're dealing with then is looking at Europe. It's been infected with this sort of stuff as well. Totally subverted in ways, democratically even, right? You remember the guy in Limerick, is he a local councillor, who said that was a protesters in Ireland that they should be shot in the head, right? So this sort of attitude, an elected official, by the way, right, whose allegiance to a different morality is probably far more extreme than Irish people would be accustomed to or even interested in. But you have these happenings going on. Again, we're just looking at the board and seeing, okay, what's going on here really, right? So the question then is it essential for American safety that Europe becomes stable and expels any of these sleepers if and when they're found in these countries, to find them and get rid of them, right? Is it essential for America? Probably not, right? But is it preferable? I would suggest so, right? So we have a few European nations. France has nuclear weapons, England has nuclear weapons, I'd imagine Germany has nuclear weapons, and that's enough, right? So that's enough for the potential for massive damage to be caused. And what you're seeing in England, especially England, it's a sorry state to see a people who declared themselves as the dominant force of the world, right? The pinnacle of human achievement, That's what would have buoyed the English courage or English arrogance even over the centuries, right? To see them just be totally taken over from within is a sorry thing to look at. And again, for English people, don't allow that. Don't pick up sticks and run. Like, don't do that. Fight for that nation. Like, fight for your country, for your history. Get that back. Don't give that over, right? To be ruled by people who are going to treat you terribly. Don't accept that. Get that country back, right? For your own sakes, but also for Ireland's sake, right? Because we're nearly fated to suffer the same future that England allows, right? Because the spillover is just axiomatic, right? So is it preferable for the European states to cleanse themselves of any of these sort of dangers, right? Because that's what they are, the risks and dangers. Yes, of course. So potentially, and this is obviously, look, we would all like for the obvious trafficking that is going on in this country, the demographic displacement of Irish people, the total eradication of homogeneity in Irish cultures, Irish villages, Irish towns, and the threat and risk and fear that is putting onto people, right? We want that finished. So there's nearly a natural tendency or a desire to read into someone like Donald Trump, right? To read into their thinking something that is beneficial for us, right? It'd be lovely to think that someone as powerful as Trump, who's saying good things in terms of looking after his people, would also have a similar sentiment to Ireland and would even act in a way that is beneficial to the Irish people. It'd be lovely to assume that. Do I know that? Of course I don't, because I've never met the man, and nor can I read the man in terms of understanding his motivations, right? But if you take the policies and the actions that he has taken are aimed towards the betterment of America and American people, we accept that, then you can accept that he's going to do something, or what he does is going to be in line with benefiting him, right? Of course, that's why we all act, and of benefiting America because he sees himself as the shepherd of American people, right? Call it what you want, but he's acting like a king, right? A good king who's fulfilling his role and obligations to the people. People can argue with it all they want, they don't have to agree with it, but that's the archetype that he's invoking, right? And that's what's happening. So if he is going to meet European leaders, he's going to be seeking things that are in America's interest. Number one is the economy, that speaks for itself, right? But number two is national security. And that would involve England not being taken over by an antagonistic ideology that if they were to get into specific positions of power in England, you can see it from the ground level up there. See it, same in Ireland, local councillors, mayors, TDs, and then up into members of parliament and members of the military and members of the police force, all that sort of stuff. You can see that in Ireland, you can see it across the board, right? It's happening in nearly all Western countries. So there, whatever way you want to look at it, and we can park aside any moral leanings or any judgment on it, we can just see it for what it is. We have foreign element, Islamic culture and ideology, and foreign just because it didn't originate in the West. So we're told, right? There might have been hands involved in it coming from Rome or the Vatican and at its inception, but it's a foreign religious element. It's an ideology, and it's an ideology for a global caliphate, right, or a caliphate, a worldwide Islamic totalitarian theocratic state, right, where every factor of life is dominated by this code of conduct, Sharia law, right? There's elements of that have been creeping into Europe, flooding into Europe and America, right? So the last thing in Donald Trump and America's interest is for a load of these people to get into positions of power where they now get their hands on weaponry, right? Remember Lisa Smith in the military, right? So what happened there? What happened there? Are there sleepers in the military? How high up the food chain are they? How detrimental could they be in England? Could they get their hands on the suitcase, right, on the red button? These are significant threats to America, right? It might be threats that America could quickly counter and dissolve, but they're threats nonetheless, right? They're also threats to the whole of the European people, right? They're threats to the whole of the European people. They're threats to Russia. They're threats to, name it, right? Catastrophe in the world, right? So could part of his negotiations be, and I don't think this is just wishful thinking, as people might suggest, right? Or you're living in hope and you're seeing him as a messiah or whatever, or a Christ or a savior. I'm not. I'm reading things as they're moving, and I'm looking at what Trump might do based on him and his actions and his words, right? That his motivation is for American people, and he lives in America, therefore his motivation is towards himself and his family as well, and his country, as he sees it, right? So could part of the negotiations be that Trump won't cripple the EU financially, which they could do, so long as the EU begins to clear out house, right? Empty the house, get rid of this colonizing effect that's been happening in European countries and that European leaders have been allowing to happen, right? Get rid of it. America, it's in their interest to have a stable and friendly Europe, right? They don't have to be best buds, but at least they're not antagonistic to America, right? So that's what we could be looking at. So the meetings are going ahead today. I think Simon Harris from Ireland is going over, and God love it. I would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation, because I couldn't even imagine what he'd say to Donald Trump or JD Vance, right? He's just in way over his head, to the point where he don't even realize he's in over his head. He thinks he's the pinnacle of intellectualism, right? He really, really does. So it'd be interesting to see, but we'll see what happens I suppose, from the fallout, or if there's any deals are made. And again, we probably won't be told this on the surface, right? It could just be, yeah, look, we made great economic deals and we want to work together. That's the surface stuff, right? We always know that there's different layers to things. That's just, we're given one element of it, but there's other layers to it, and I suppose we'll find out what they are, right? We'll see.